Shalom. Welcome to the Messianic Hour with Rabbi Scott Seculo. The Messianic Hour is a program designed to give you insight into the Jewish roots of your faith. Rabbi Scott is also here to answer your questions and help you gain a deeper understanding of Bible prophecy. And now, here's your host, Rabbi Scott Seculo.
Shalom and welcome to another edition of the Messianic Hour. I'm your host, Rabbi Scott. This show is dedicated to reaching the lost and educating the found. And we're going to have a real interesting show for you this week, as many across the U.S. Heard this past week of the situation with Ralph Messer wrapping a tour around a pastor here in Atlanta. And we're going to be talking about that in the second half of the show. And you're not going to want to miss this one. It's going to be a very interesting show as we look to understand what was going on and how Ralph Messer really was not following the Jewish customs or traditions or the scripture as well. So we're going to talk about that in the second half of the show. We're going to be looking first at Acts chapter 17, right at the second half of that, as we'll finish that up this week as well. And, you know, Judy, we've been talking a lot about what's been going on in Israel. It's kind of quiet right now for Israel. A lot of the focus is on Syria and other parts of the world, but we still have to be careful. Israel, there's an underscoring talk here of, will Israel attack Iran?
That's very true.
They have the ability to. They've done it before with the nuclear plant, and I think we're seeing a lot of talk. It's going to be very interesting.
It is, and probably Israel is the best way poised to do that. They have the intelligence and the intelligence agency to be able to pull it off. Although they'll probably need the U.S.'s help, although it'll be kind of a hush-hush thing.
Right. Although President Obama has shown a kind of a turn, a little going to force with the fact of an attack on there, and I think we're seeing that there's a possibility. Again, he keeps on talking about, let's try to do this any other way, but I think he's going to realize that doesn't work with this culture. That's not what's going to happen. You have to show force.
Well, and in fact, President Perez of Israel has addressed the Knesset, and in it he was addressing the Iranian people. And his words to them were, "We were not born enemies, and there is no need for us to live as enemies. Do not allow the flags of hostility to cast a dark shadow on your heritage."
Right. And, Judy, a number of the Messianic congregations leading up to Purim, which is just weeks away, including our congregation, we're going to do a voluntary day of fast. The day before is a time of fasting and praying for the leaders of Iran, that they will change their ways. We're told to pray for our enemies, and we need to pray for them. So we want to encourage our listening audience. You can, if you're out there, you can join us on that day. We'll be talking more about it. It'll also be on our website where you can join in on that.
Well, and just to finish up real quick, President Perez also said, in regard to the Iranian threat, Iran is not only a threat to Israel, it constitutes a real danger to humanity as a whole. The present Iranian regime is imperialistic and aspires to be the region's supreme ruler. The world should learn the lesson drawn from the Nazi atrocities. Luckily, today there is a serious and strong Jewish state. It will not forget past crimes in order to ensure that they do not repeat themselves. I endorse the American position and the European position, and I believe they have still not had the last word.
And so we're seeing a real shift with what's going on. I want to encourage you, go to our website, rabbiscott.com. If you haven't signed up for our newsletter, please do so. You get a free gift, the book, I Have a Friend Who's Jewish to You, and a prophecy card that helps you to share your faith with your unsaved friends. The prophecy card has 70 of the key prophecies, where they are in the Torah, where they're fulfilled in the renewed covenant, and how to witness to an unsaved Jewish person and Gentile as well. So it's a great gift. It's free. All you got to do is go to sign up. Remember also to check out our YouTube videos and our website, rabbiscott.com. You can check this show and other shows out as well. Also included is our weekly Shabbat services and teachings. A matter of fact, if you want to know more about our response to the situation with Ralph Messer, you can go to our website and YouTube. We have a 3-part sermon that I did on that. But right after the second break, we'll be talking about that as well. Again, you're listening to the Messianic Hour. We'll be back right after this. Stay tuned. We'll be looking at Acts chapter 17.
Welcome back to the Messianic Hour. I'm Judy Seculo, and I'm glad that you're with us today as we finish up Maybe. Never knows
No,
with
we're gonna
Rabbi.
finish it up.
We're going to finish it up. Okay, well, sometimes you like to talk and go on rabbit trails. Acts 17,
Yes,
starting at verse 16, and we see that we are actually in the famous city of Athens, the center of Hellenist thought and life. And we know that Rabbi Shaul is here, and we're going to talk about his experiences.
We are. And Judy, what's so interesting, too, is what we're about to see, his experiences, and what we're about to talk with the second half with Ralph Messer. You can see how the connection is amazing, how God's timing is on this as we look at the Scripture.
Well, we know that this is a city that is populated throughout with idols and altars and everything that is, probably anti-God.
Right.
As possible. And it's the first time that we really see Rabbi Shaul deciding to take his message outside of the synagogue. Every time up until then, he always went to the synagogue to talk to the Jewish people that were there, because, again, to the Jew first,
Right.
and then to the God-fearers, the people who were searching after God. But now we see that he's leaving, and he's going to try a different approach and take it directly to the Gentiles. So why don't you tell us about this?
One thing about that city, too, is it's one of the three where the three Roman universities are, too. So these are very scholarly people, very sophisticated, and he's going to try to come across, and it's going to be a little different. It's what we really see take place here.
Well, and we see that he's in the marketplace, and he's talking to anybody who would come by, and two groups of people stop by. Epicureans were really, their whole thought, their whole practice came from the pursuit of the path of least resistance, basically, and they were very self-indulgent. And then on Stoicism was really almost the exact opposite. It was a system of self-denial bent on bringing oneself into harmony with the natural order of the universe. So basically, true happiness could only be achieved when one was removed from ambition.
Almost that New Age type feeling of supernaturalism. But this is the type of group that could have coined the phrase "have a nice day," because that's really all they were concerned about. Is just everything should be happy, everything should be nice. And so Paul, being a very scholarly person, says, okay, I'm going to come at this at a different approach, bring it onto their level, and bringing it to the Gentile without the Jewish understandings and backing behind it. And he's going to see, Judy, it just doesn't work that way.
Well, he gets invited to what's called Mars Hill, and it was originally a little hill northwest of the famous Acropolis that was in Athens. And students of Greek mythology will recall how Mars and Athena competed for the city of Athens, and she got the Acropolis and he got the little hill. And this is where they would go and they would talk and they would debate and they would exchange ideas. And the invitation to present his message was a great opportunity for Paul, but I think it's going to show us that not all opportunities are things that we're going to want to take.
Right, and Judy, he breaks it down into pretty much almost every line dealing with a little different faction that would associate with this Greek mindset. He deals with the unknown God. He starts off with that. They actually had a monument to the unknown gods because they did not want to offend an unknown God and have that wrath come down upon them. And then they have the self-sufficiency of God. Then he goes into the providence of God, the natural revelation of God. And he goes on to these points to try to show them this God that they could relate to. And while they don't have any problems with that point, really where it comes into is when he brings in the resurrection of the dead. And this is where he really lost them.
He's finding himself struggling to communicate the gospel to people who are outside the content of Judaism. Right. Again, and this is what we always say, we've got to bring it back to content. Just like we've moved away from it now in the 21st century and bringing it back, Paul's finding that to take it out of context, it doesn't translate, so to speak.
Because how do you talk about the Messiah that is talked about from the Jewish perspective without bringing an understanding of the Jewish background? And that's where a lot of people fall short today, is we don't put emphasis enough on the Torah and those teachings to understand what Yeshua and the disciples were doing and why they were doing it. Not only the scriptural parts, but the traditions as well, because all that gives us the brighter picture. I remember, Judy, when we started dating, that one of the things that you really saw was you didn't really understand communion until you celebrated a Passover Seder, and then those pieces started to fall into place.
But when you put it into the Passover Seder and understand what cup it is and why you're eating matzah, because matzah can't have yeast. I'm sorry,
Right.
but nowadays it kills me when I see a picture of communion with bread.
Right.
Because we know yeast symbolizes
Sin.
sin. So how can you take communion with something that has yeast in it that represents sin? It's
Right.
got to be
If he says, take this as my body, it's without sin, not take this as my body full of sin.
Exactly. So sorry, little pet peeve. Okay, I did a rabbit trail. I will admit, Judy did a rabbit trail, bringing us back in though. But we see that Paul declaring the natural revelation of God and the fact that human beings are God's offspring argue against that idolatry and polytheism. So again, he's kind of preaching to the choir here. The Greek schools had largely rejected the polytheism of classical Greek religion.
But when he brought up, as we mentioned before, when he brought up the understanding of the resurrection, that's really where he went outside of that classical Greek thought, and that's where he kind of lost them. And again, not understanding the Jewishness there, that's where this problem came in, is you can't take stuff try to bring it to a level that they can understand without let them understanding the Jewish background as well.
And I think the one thing that we really have to remember is that geographically and historically, Jerusalem and Athens were not too far removed from each other, but spiritually, they were worlds apart. And I think we actually see that today, if you kind of put it in the context of the church,
right,
and Judaism or our Jewish roots.
Or Greek versus Jewish thinking or philosophy.
Right. We've been pushed apart through Constantine, through history, through the enemy trying to pull us away from our roots. We're almost just as opposed today as it was in the time of Paul.
Right.
But what we're seeing through the rebirth of Messianic Judaism, through what we try to do here with the Messianic Hour.
Messianic Judaism, as we'll talk about later.
Okay. Through what we try to do here with the Messianic Hour is bring it back into context. Bring it back where that tree, like we talked on Tu B'Shevet, a tree's got to have good roots in order to grow.
Exactly.
If we don't have good roots, we're not going to grow. And I'm not saying that the traditional mainstream church hasn't grown, but it's not that reflection of that tree of life that was originally intended that God had.
Well, it's lost some of its leaves in the sense that it's not reaching its full potential. The call is to the Jew first and to the nations. And without reaching the Jewish people, how are we going to fulfill God's calling? Just like Paul sees it difficult when you don't go to the Jew first, that's the same problem we're seeing even today. And this concept that we have moved away from reaching out and understanding the Jewish culture, the Jewish faith, and understanding the Jewish people has kind of brought us to an understanding of how we are to do what we're called to do by Messiah. And that's really the focus.
Well, and we see as a result of his experience on Mars Hill, Rabbi Shaul disavowed all these Greek models and approaches altogether. In fact, he says in 1 Corinthians 1:1-2, "When I came to you, brothers, I did not come with eloquence or superior wisdom, as I proclaimed to you the testimony about God. For I resolved to know nothing while I was with you except Yeshua, Messiah, and him crucified." So now he's not going to try to dress this gospel in humanistic rhetoric, Hellenistic philosophies. He's going to present it in the contents in which it was meant to be.
And when he does it, we see great results. We see that when he left Athens, while there was several salvations, it wasn't as big, and there was no synagogue to be left behind. There was a traditional synagogue there, but no real messianic movement was able to come in because he didn't follow the plan that God told him to the Jew and to the nations. When you do it God's way, we really see results, and that's what it's all talking about. I want to encourage you, go to our website, RabbiScott.com. Again, you can learn more and watch this show and hear this on YouTube. So I want you to go check that out, RabbiScott.com. While you're there, you can plant a tree in Israel. This is the time of year to do that. You can do it anytime. That blesses us and the land as well. And remember, we are a listener-supported show, so check out RabbiScott.com. When we get back right after this break, we'll be talking about Ralph Messer and the false teachings. Stay tuned.